Ever since becoming the Scream Queen, Jamie Lee Curtis has stolen the hearts of fans. But while the actress is always badass on screen, there were times in her personal life when she wasn't as confident. Why did Curtis think that she'd never find love? What made her take fewer roles? And what was the hardest thing about accepting her transgender child?
It's outrageous.
We'll tell you all in a minute. Can't Buy Me Love. When she was younger, Jamie Lee never thought she'd have a normal family, all because she didn't have an example of one growing up, because her own family was far from normal. Jamie Lee was born to a family of actors, or should we say, celebrity icons? Her father was the Some Like It hot star Tony Curtis, and her mother was Hitchcock icon Janet Leigh. The pair was often called the Hollywood golden couple back in the day. But unfortunately, the life of glamour wasn't enough to keep them together. By the time I came along, my parents' bond had deteriorated precipitously as their stardom grew, Jamie Lee shared. Born in an attempt to salvage the marriage, Curtis soon found herself without a dad, as Tony left the family for a much younger girl. Actually, the actor married as many as 6 times, and Jamie Lee's mother, Janet, tied the knot with 4 different men in her lifetime. Counting in other members of the immediate family, the Curtis Lee household went through 13 divorces in total. Due to all this mess, Jamie Lee didn't feel loved as a child. So it's no wonder that she has always struggled with even the idea of love. Her experiences made Jamie Lee think that she'd never be a wife and mother. But this all changed when she turned 26, all thanks to an encounter with comedy director Christopher Guest. Although the actress didn't believe in love, she felt something in that moment.
I met my husband by seeing his picture in a magazine and saying out loud to a friend of mine, I'm going to marry that dude, and married him 4 months later.
Christopher helped to change Jamie Lee's mind and prove to her that real love does exist. One of the longest relationships I've had seeking comfort and contact and connection is with Chris, Curtis admits these days. She immediately felt safe with him, and it was a feeling Curtis had never experienced before. It's the safety of knowing his car is in the garage, that I'm not alone, and that he's here, she said. It wasn't long before the actress was ready to start a family with him. Yet the next challenge was just around the corner. No matter what they tried, Jamie Lee and Chris couldn't have a baby. 2 years after the wedding, they realized that the only way to become parents was to adopt. A growing family. Jamie Lee and Chris adopted their first daughter, Annie, from her birth mother just after she was born. 9 years later, the family was ready for another baby. That's when then-named baby Thomas came along. From the very beginning, Jamie Lee had a close relationship with her children. She was even present at her second kid's birth, cut the cord, and was the first to hold the baby. The kids quickly connected and became just like real siblings. From day one, Jamie Lee and Chris made a promise that they'd do everything to be there for their family and to raise their children in lots of love. Motherhood is every wonderful cliche in the book. There's an unexplainable sort of thing you just feel. It's a permanent commitment, one I've changed my life to meet, the actress once shared. Jamie Lee has always been deeply involved in the lives of her children. She even started taking fewer roles to take care of them, because she couldn't stand the thought of somebody else raising her kids.
Which is why for years I did commercials, because it allowed me to basically be the mom I wanted to be.
Besides, Curtis always wanted to prove that families with adopted children were just like any other, even though there may be differences. Her experience inspired her to become an author. To talk about real families joined by adoption, the actress wrote a children's book titled Tell Me Again About the Night I Was Born. Curtis explained that adopted kids usually don't know anything about their birth. The book was written to let children who joined their families through adoption know that their own birth stories were exciting too, she explained. But even though Jamie Lee has always been close to her kids, she didn't notice the inner struggles of her youngest child. Coming out of their shell. At age 16, Jamie Lee's youngest, who was still called Tom, started questioning her identity. She was assigned male at birth but didn't feel comfortable in her own body. With time, she felt more and more like she wasn't a boy. But at one point, she had a negative experience in therapy that she hasn't shared much about. After that, it took Ruby years to come out to her parents. She desperately wanted to share her feelings with her closest people, but she was nervous because she didn't know how they'd react. It was scary. Just the sheer fact of telling them something about me they didn't know, Ruby explained. 2 years ago, she finally found the courage to do it. but not through speaking. Ruby decided to text her mother, and Jamie Leigh immediately called her back to say that she'd always be there for her. The actress shared that, unsurprisingly, there were tears involved in their coming out conversation, but it ended well due to unconditional love. Jamie Leigh was once asked if she was surprised when Ruby came out, and the actress replied that, when she thought about it, she actually must have seen it coming. Curtis knew that she had a boyfriend, used the word bi, and always played female avatars in video games, but it was still a shock. Gender identity and sexual orientation are two separate things, Curtis once commented, so it never crossed her mind that her child might want to change gender. However, just like any good mother, she was ready to support her child and accept them as they are. And doing so wasn't hard, given how much Curtis adores her kids. But since we don't live in a perfect world, there were people who tried to make it difficult for her. Sadly, we see a lot of hate about the LGBT community, and Jamie Leigh had to face some of it.
It's outrageous and terrifying.
People would say it was all nothing more than a publicity stunt, or would call the actress a sinner for accepting her daughter. What's even more obscene is that Ruby started to receive death threats. There are people that want to annihilate her and people like her, Curtis said. Apart from dealing with naysayers, Jamie Leigh faced other challenges as well. Most of all, she found it difficult to get used to her child's new name and female pronouns. It felt like studying another language to her. To avoid mistakes, the actress learned to slow herself down while speaking and be mindful of what she says. Yet, Jamie Leigh admitted that she and her husband still have occasional slips. But Ruby understands that it's hard and doesn't get mad at them for it. After all, anyone can bloom in love. Jamie Leigh went from not believing in love to being married for almost 4 decades with 2 kids. So she certainly knows a thing or two about family values. And her daughter's trans journey is a perfect example of how unconditional love and support can make anything possible. Jamie Leigh often says that she's delighted to be Ruby's mother. And the actress once shared that she and her husband observed their child's transition in wonder and pride. Besides, they explained that sharing the experience had nothing to do with publicity. Ruby said that she's always tried her best to stay away from the spotlight. But she knew that her trans journey could help others, and that's why she decided to make her story public. And Jamie Leigh made it her mission to help the trans community.
I will do everything that I can, along with millions of other people, to support and defend the rights of these trans young people.
These days, Ruby's happily married to her partner, Cynthia. They had a cosplay wedding in the spring, and Jamie Leigh officiated the private ceremony. The event took place in the family's home backyard, which made it all the more special. Especially since Jamie Leigh's older daughter, Annie, previously had her big day there too.
Just forgetting all of show-off business, being a parent, having both of your children married in your backyard.
It was very meaningful for the actress and all of her family members. Let's wish all the happiness in the world to the newlyweds. After all, they definitely deserve it. And what do you think about Jamie Leigh supporting her child no matter what? Share in the comments below, and as always, stay awesome.